because Hinduism is the oldest religious tradition on earth. It dates back to about 3500 BCE and has been a constant part of the cultural and social history of the Indian subcontinent from that time forward. We can learn a lot about Hinduism and their religious practices and their cultural ideas, and especially about, for context of this course, the ethical and moral commitments that that has engendered in the people who've embraced it. So first of all, let's talk about India for just a second. The Indian subcontinent covers modern India and also Pakistan and Bangladesh in this basic region here. For Westerners, it can be difficult to understand, but it's very complex and changing and yet still unified region. This is an interesting map. I don't know how well you can see it, and I did post Tuesday's thing on Blackboard, and I'll post this one as well. But as you look at this map, some of the areas are marked as stable, and some are marked as subject to change, and some are marked as isolated in the mountainous regions. And the thicker lines represent firm boundaries, and the thinner lines represent boundaries that get crossed more often. And so you have different people groups within the Indian subcontinent, and there's some moving around. There is some sharing of culture that goes on. And so for us looking from the outside, it looks like it's one thing, but it's not nearly as unified once you get on the ground as it seems to be here. So someone who grows up in the Bengal area would have a lot of cultural differences from someone who grows up in Rajasthan, for example, or Punjab, or definitely in the south, in the Tamil regions. Differences of language, differences of culture, and those sorts of things. So what that means is that when we think of religion, we think of like Christianity as one thing, and we think of Islam as something separate, and Judaism as something separate. And we tend to think of Hinduism as one thing. But that's more of what we do for our own convenience than it is the reality on the ground. There are religious similarities between these people, but there are also some serious religious distinctives, much the way Christians have distinctives. So a Catholic Christian and a Lutheran Christian and a Pentecostal Christian, they're all Christians, they're all praying to Jesus, but they're very different in some significant ways. And you get the same sort of thing with Hinduism, and even to a larger extent. So, well, when you think about Hinduism, if you think about it at all, you probably think you know a little bit, and the little bit you probably think of karma. You've heard the term karma before, right? So, karma is what? Tell me what karma is.
Like if you put out good things and you do good things, the universe or whoever will make good things happen to you.
Right. And on the other side of that coin, right? Right. If you do bad things, then bad things will come back to you, right? So we sort of have this idea, and that's not far from the truth, although we tend to make jokes of it and make light of it. And there was a TV show that you probably never watched because it's gone now, but My Name is Earl, where he goes around trying to work out his karma. And so we have this idea that karma is what goes around, comes around. But it involves a lot more than just retribution for wrong actions or even retribution for good actions. Karma is a metaphysical accounting for one's right and wrong actions. The idea here is that everything you do, everything you say, carries with it a moral component. There is no such thing as an amoral action in this way of thinking. Everything you do is either good or it's bad. And that goodness or badness will come back to you at a later point in time, either in this life or in a subsequent life. And I'll say more about that in a minute. We think about this wrong when we think about karma coming to get you. Like karma, you miss someone, or like there's a God out there specifically targeting you. For Hindus, this is more of just the way the universe works. It's almost like gravity, right? If you jump, you're going to come back down because that's just the way the universe is designed to work, that there's this thing called gravity. It's not like there's, some sort of being pulling you back down. It's just gravity. Karma is the same sort of way. It's more of a natural law than it is a religious law. So it's not like that God's coming to get you or to punish you or to reward you. It's just the idea that everything you do, that in committing that act, part of what you're doing is creating this rebounding action upon yourself. And it's rebounding upon you because it's moving you forward, and I'll say more about that as well. But yeah, it's this basic idea that everything you do, and it may take a while, and it may not be something that you can even discern, but whatever's happening in your life at this moment is largely a result of the situation that you have created for yourself. So karma gets accrued based on all your actions and your speech and your thoughts, and helps you along your path, which is your dharma, which I'll say more about in a minute. Does that make sense? Questions about that? Right. So it's I want to be careful how I say this. Hinduism is not a specific religion like Christianity is. It's more of a set of beliefs and practices about how the world works. And karma is not specifically tied to any one God or divine being. It's just this basic idea that's been around since the earliest writings of Hinduism. And it's an idea that gets transported into Buddhism and to Shinto and to Confucianism. And we'll see this again and again with some of these other religions. But it is constantly at work. And we'll also see forms of it when we get to Christianity, sowing and reaping and things like that. And I'll come back to karma in a minute when we talk about your life journey. Another thing we have to talk about with regard to Indian culture is that for centuries there was a hard and fast caste system. The caste system names your place in the world in this incarnation. There's reincarnation in Hinduism, the idea that your soul, and I'll say more about soul in just a minute as well, but that you're going on this journey through the universe, coming from God and going back to God. And along that journey you have any number, perhaps hundreds, of instances where your soul is born into this world in a physical manifestation. And as you become a human, that life takes on one of these forms. You're into one of these groups. You're either a Brahmin, B-R-A-H-M-I-N, which would be priests or scholars. That's your highest level. Or you can be in the warrior class, which includes your political rulers. Beneath that would be your artisans, your farmers, your merchants, skilled labor, that sort of thing. Beneath that, unskilled workers, laborers. And you can see this is broad because there are fewer people at the top and more people at the bottom. And then for many, many centuries, there was this group at the bottom called the untouchables, or the Dalits. D-A-L-I-T-S. I don't think that's on there. Is the Hindu word for untouchable. I don't have a marker. But the untouchables were people who were barely human, consigned to abject poverty. The only sort of work these folks were given to do was the work that no one else would do, like cleaning toilets or working on the sewer system or things like that. But this has changed to some extent in modern times. And I'll say more about that in just a second once you have all this down. The untouchables is not a present reality in the way India has intentionally constructed its society, but in these other four groups, you are still in your caste, and your caste has a lot to say about what your responsibilities are in life. And meeting your responsibilities in life has a lot to say about whether or not you're achieving good karma or bad karma. So if you're in this group, you need to stay in this group and do what you're supposed to do in this group and not try to move around. So in the clip I showed you just a minute ago, her family cuts her off because she's in one of these higher classes and marries a man from a lower class, and that's unacceptable. Yes?
Were you like, okay, so if you were like a ruler and a scholar, were you like even more powerful, or is that?
You wouldn't have been both.
Okay.
So like if you were part of the warrior ruling class, you wouldn't go to school, you wouldn't spend your time learning. So it's not just a who you are, it's what you do. And what you do is a function of who you are. And both are you working out what you're supposed to be doing. So whatever position you're born into, so if you're born into a family of warriors or a family of political rulers, you will carry on the family business, so to speak. And you won't leave that, because to leave that would be for you to reject your culture and your religion and to set yourself up for moving back down the ladder in your next incarnation. So the culture and religion sort of work together to keep this thing moving forward. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? All right. So the caste system today is still intact. It's not quite as strict. You can move around a bit. It is still frowned upon to move from, especially moving downward, is definitely frowned upon. Discrimination between the castes was made illegal in 1962, and now you have some unskilled laborers who do function as teachers or even government officials, and all castes are supposedly treated equally by law, at least in theory or at least on paper. And the untouchable class has been officially done away with, and education is open to all castes. Although graduate or higher level education would still be a function of the priestly or the scholarly caste. And what caste you are determines a lot about how you go about your daily life. The sort of religious rituals that you would engage in are different for different castes. The sort of lifestyle you would lead are different for different castes. And then obviously the sort of work that you do is divided up. Now, as he mentioned in the video that I showed you, one of the things Hinduism is most known for are its gods. There are some estimates, or there are 33 million gods. I've seen that multiplied by 10. There were 300 million gods. There are a lot of gods in Hinduism. There are three main gods: Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. This is Brahma, Brahma. This gets a little confusing. Brahmins with an I are the priests. Yeah, I thought I had one, but then I didn't have one. Which means someone took it out of my bag. Probably a child of mine. Yeah, just throw it out.
Never mind.
Yeah. Good. So, we'll try it. All right, thanks. Don't be shy. It's okay. So a Brahmin is a priest. Brahma is this god right here, one of the three. Tramlite, you don't worry about that word. One of the three main gods of Hinduism. He's the creator of the universe as we experience, the creator of the physical world. This is Vishnu, and this is Shiva, the destroyer god. Brahma creates the world, Vishnu sustains the world, Shiva destroys the world. So all sorts of activities can be expressed.
Can you spell those out?
Oh yeah, so Brahma, that's this one. Vishnu is the one in the middle. And Shiva is the one on the right. There's also Ganesh, the elephant head. He's the god of good fortune. You'll often see statues of Ganesh if you go to an Indian restaurant, or if you have a friend who's Hindu or from a Hindu background. It's not uncommon to see statues of Ganesh or Vishnu in a home. They're thought to bring sustaining or good fortune or protection to the home. And all of these gods, again, looking at, is anyone in here Hindu that wants to help me with this? Probably not. Yes, all right. You correct me if I'm getting wrong here. From the outside looking in, we see this and we think, oh, they're polytheists. They worship lots of different gods. But that's not really how a Hindu person would think of it. A Hindu person would think that there is one God. That one God, and here's the third one that I need to mention, is Brahman. You could call Brahman the soul of the universe, or the one God of all. And then Vishnu or Shiva or Brahma are expressions of that one God. Not all that different from the Trinity if you're from a Christian background, where you have different expressions of God. There are some distinctions, but they're not as much as we think. So different families will have different gods, different localities, different regions will have different gods. But the way they understand it is that these are different forms, different modes of expression of the one God. Is that fair?
Yeah, like, so my family is Hindu and we're Brahmin, but we have our own family god. So our family god is Shiva, and Shiva is also like the father of Ganesh. So like we worship both of them, like that's our family god. So each caste or each group usually has their own family god. Because like within the caste there's subcaste also. So,
Right. And they're all tied to these stories like the comic books that he was looking at, which I think are really cool. They're really pretty to look at too. So, but it's not different gods. They're all connected.
they're all connected in one.
And they're all connected into Brahman. So, and then the last picture here is of, you saw them throwing flowers in the video. This is a puja. This is how Hindu culture venerates or worships their gods. They will bring flowers. They will bring dances or rituals, or they will feed the statues of their gods. They'll burn incense in front of them.
So it's like an altar.
Yeah, yeah. And some homes will have altars in the home as well with the statue of their particular god as well. All right. So, yes, that's Ganesh. He's the god of provision, right? Good luck, fortune. Yeah. And what's interesting is that, and we'll get to Buddhism in a few class sessions, but Buddhism is an offshoot from Hinduism. And so if you notice, like from the neck down, this looks a lot like some Buddhist statues that you've seen. If you go to a Chinese restaurant, you see the big-bellied Buddha. The big-bellied Buddha is a takeoff of Ganesh. Because as far as we know, Buddha was actually a fairly skinny guy. But we'll get to there. So let's talk about some key concepts within Hinduism. The first is samsara, or samsara. And samsara is your personal life journey, or your personal moral journey, or you could call it your quest. In one sense, all of Hinduism is understood as a personal moral quest, a journey to better yourself morally in this lifetime and beyond this lifetime through to eternity. That each person is working to perfect his or her own soul and escape the cycle of death and rebirth. So samsara names both your life journey and the cycle. So you're caught up in this cycle of you're alive, and then you die, and then there's a migration period where your soul has no body, and then you go through a rebirth process, and you just keep doing this. And your goal is called moksha, and that's when your soul, which is a part of Brahman, the universal soul, moksha is you reunifying with Brahman, and the way you do this cycle over and over again, this is samsara.